Today I read a story about one of Prabhupada's early disciples who was in India. And Prabhupada asked him to go to London. He was very anxious to start a center in London. He was looking at all the big cities and we need to open centers. He was really pushing the movement. And he really, really wanted a center in London. And this devotee had agreed to go to London. However, Prabhupada read a letter that he wrote to a friend stating that he was from India, only going to stay in London as a stopover and then go to New York. But he told Prabhupada he was going to stay in London to start a temple, and that was Prabhupada's order. So then Prabhupada soon found out that he didn't stay in London, and by reading that letter, he realized he had no intention to stay. And then Prabhupada was very upset because this disciple had disobeyed his order. He had agreed, told Prabhupada he's going to do something that he didn't do. So he disobeyed his order. And Prabhupada said that if you disobey the order of the Guru, then you have no standing in spiritual life. So he was so upset about this disciple promising and then disobeying that he wrote to many, many of his disciples explaining how this disciple had disobeyed him and lost his connection. Prabhupada used that word. He's lost the connection. And in one letter, Prabhupada was glorifying the devotees that he wrote to. So he was glorifying them, telling them how nicely they're serving him, how nicely they're following him. At the same time, contrasting that with the activities of this other devotee and how he lost his connection. So I thought that's something important to meditate on. Of course, sometimes we may not circumstantially execute the order of a spiritual master, and then we talk to him, explain to him. But this is just a general example how this devotee disobeyed the order of his guru, and Prabhupada saying, how can you make any advancement if you disobey the order of your guru? So it's heavy, I know, and there are time, place, circumstance, situations we're all dealing with. But I think it's very important because this story chastens us. And later on, this devotee started introducing some things that Prabhupada never introduced. And Prabhupada was very upset about that because he was saying to do things that Prabhupada never said to do. Then Prabhupada wrote him a letter and said, why are you saying these things? You have not asked me, you're not authorized. Then I read another story, which some of you may know, that in 1972, GBC had made some arrangements to manage things in a particular way, and then they sent the resolutions to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada didn't like any of the resolutions. Everything they were doing was against what he had generally advised them, and he said, why are you doing this without my permission? So as the leader of our movement, as the founder, as the acharya, as the guru of everyone in the movement, when someone acted on their own against Prabhupada's instructions, he was very, very upset. And he would again reinforce this idea, or emphasize that you're the disciple, you do what the Guru says, you don't disobey. So we know this, but I wanted to emphasize this because sometimes we take it lightly. And we obviously should be careful when we're trying to understand philosophy, when we're trying to understand what is the proper behavior according to what we're reading. Sometimes I've seen we make this mistake of coming to a conclusion that Prabhupada would not approve of, and we don't always realize it because we're looking at things logically. Well, if this means this and this means this, this would make sense in this situation. And then sometimes we come up with a conclusion, which unfortunately, or unknown to us, is not what Prabhupada would want. So in these letters, Prabhupada was saying it's not so much about doing it this way or that way, but what is primarily important is that the Guru is pleased. And then in this one letter, Prabhupada said, I can guarantee you, if I am not pleased, nothing will go well. It doesn't matter what you do. So this is the principle upon which our whole movement is built. So we may have some ideas that we can do things in a certain way and it may seem good, but we always have to make sure, will this be pleasing to Prabhupada? Is this in alignment with what he wants? Because succeeding by disobeying Srila Prabhupada, that's not succeeding at all. That's a grand failure. And again, real success will be when we please Prabhupada and everything happens. So sometimes I've seen when devotees are discussing philosophy or looking at things in terms of practical application, sometimes they only look at it philosophically, but they don't discuss what would actually be pleasing to Prabhupada. What are the precedents? Are there situations similar to this that Prabhupada had given his opinion on or given instructions? Because if there are, and Prabhupada says it's this way, it doesn't matter how we analyze philosophy or what we think or what our opinion is. What matters is what Prabhupada wanted and what will please him. And I know this is obvious, and you're sitting there thinking, yeah, but everybody understands this. But the reason I'm talking about it is I see a lot of times people neglect to understand what would really please Prabhupada in lieu of just analyzing philosophy and coming up with conclusions, which are often foregone conclusions. The conclusion was already made before we read what Prabhupada said, and we're only reading what Prabhupada's saying to validate our foregone conclusion, and that's dangerous. So we have to be very neutral and very detached. But if it's right, it's right, whether I like it or not, and we have to do that. Hare Krishna.